Happy New Year, everybody. Now, in this video, I would like to talk about the New Year traditions of Europe, basically, and the energies that are around at this time. Because I think that although there's a lot of attention drawn to winter solstice, and quite rightly, I think New Year is its own separate time that gets a bit overshadowed or overlooked by the winter solstice traditions. And I think we tend to think that it doesn't really mean anything, which I don't think is true. So I want to start by discussing Janus. I'm also going to talk about the web of Wyrd and what that means for us today. Now, Janus is the god of doorways, beginnings and endings, old and new. He rules the very young and the very old, and gives his name to the month we now find ourselves in, which is January. In the Roman depiction of this god of time, he was associated with conception and the male virility necessary for conception. He is by implication the force that sparks life into being. I would also argue that he is surely the force that initiates our passing from this incarnation. Although passing over is not explicitly linked with Janus, he is associated with Saturn. Saturn is often depicted as the Grim Reaper, and in astrological terms, Saturn represents life cycles, generational cycles, including that of death, as well as family legacies. So he doesn't just represent beginnings and endings, but birth and death as well. I would also add that Janus can be considered to represent a generational or familial animus or anima, which is a kind of energy or vibration that permeates the family and runs through it. This is why we talk about things like certain proclivities or talents or behaviours running in families, because Janus rules their transmission through the generations, and although sometimes he can skip a few in this regard, they do resurface later on. So this is why he rules not only beginnings and endings, but the passage through the generations. Janus is also linked with Juno, the wife of Jupiter, who presides over the month of June, which is the month of the summer solstice, as I'm sure most of you know. Juno represents childbirth. Now, another goddess associated with Janus is Vesta, or Hestia, as she was known in the ancient Greek world. She was the ruler of the hearth and home, and is the goddess whom the Vestal Virgin served. Between them, Juno and Vesta represent the female energies necessary for the optimal creation of life, the birthing of the child, and a safe home to do it in. So in both solstices, summer and winter, we see the male and female aspects of creation represented, the male at winter and the female during the summer. Now, Janus is often depicted as a two-faced god looking in opposite directions. He is a liminal god of in-between times and places. One face gazes towards the year just gone, old and wizened, gazing back towards the past, the days of your youth, whilst the other face is young and optimistic and looks towards the future, brimming with hopes and dreams. Janus, in this position, contemplates the span of linear time. He reflects on the past and looks to the future, whilst being firmly rooted in the present moment. Excuse me. In this regard, his role is reminiscent, to me anyway, of the three Norns of the Norse tradition, Wyrd, Verdandi and Skuld, who respectively represent the past, present and future. The three Norns were said to weave the web of Wyrd, which in a nutshell is a concept that refers to our own life path. I hesitate to use the word destiny here, as in the Norse tradition it is clear that we have an input in our web of Wyrd, and therefore we have an input as to how our life turns out. Our own webs of Wyrd interact with the orlog, another Norse concept that describes wider events and circumstances of our lives that impact upon our web of Wyrd. So this can refer to things like national events or familial events or world events, even things that don't directly involve you but their consequences have an impact upon you. The orlog dominates the web of Wyrd, our own web of Wyrd, but we have power within our own web of Wyrd. So I think the phrase cutting your cloth according to your material sums up this concept very succinctly. The Norns, by the way, were the inspiration for the three witches in Shakespeare's Macbeth. Now, to return to Janus, Janus is also associated with Gemini, whose astrological time occurs mainly in June, as stated earlier. Mythological twins are present in all cultures and usually represent dark and light, or some kind of balancing of cosmic forces, which is why I think they're associated with the solstices. However, they are also, can be, like with Janus, used to represent a kind of passage of time, such as old and new, or the elder and the apprentice kind of dynamic. So, for example, in the first branch of the Welsh Mabinogion, Paul, who is the Prince of Difford, after a misguided hunt which has gone wrong, he angers Arwen by straying into his underworld territory, and subsequently has to make a deal with Arwen to get out of the trouble that he's caused, and he agrees to switch places with him for a year and a day, and to defeat Arwen's foe at the end of the year for him. So Paul decides to rule in Anwin for a year and a day and slays Arwen's rival Halfgan at the end of it, whilst Arwen rules in Paul's kingdom. A year and a day, by the way, is a very common time motif in the Celtic world, and I may do a video on what that means at some point later on. But once again, we have this theme, as with Janus, of the ancestral spirit, here represented by Arwen, guiding and mentoring the young and present generation, which is represented by Paul. There are many other examples of this, of course, but the duality motif around both solstice times is something to note, and it's found a lot in winter solstice traditions in Europe. So, for example, this balancing of the dark and light we see with St. Nicholas or Father Christmas, or Santa Claus, however he's called. And in Europe, figures such as Krampus or Zwart or who they punish naughty children. Spain also has some traditions around this as well, such as Olentzero, who gives out presents either on his own or sometimes with a kind of Father Christmas type figure. However, in the Catalan and Basque regions, they also have some very, very specific New Year's traditions. In the Catalan region, they have a creature called Noseman, who appears at New Year's Eve with just one nose, as the previous 364 for every day of the year have dropped off. And there are, in the Basque region, I think it's the Ujanko figure who has lots of eyes instead of noses, and he also reports back to Father Christmas and on how good the children have been. But it's this, especially with Noseman, this idea of him being seen. He's not seen all year round, but he's seen at the end of the year, which is quite interesting to me. It's almost as if that kind of, I don't know, passage of time energy can only be witnessed for a very short amount of time. But these are just all my musings. But this, to me, is a very interesting and quite neglected time of the year. It's a liminal time where the veils are very thin by definition as we hinge between the old year that was and the new year that is to come. Now, all that we have left of these ancient musings are our New Year's resolutions. However, I think in days gone by they were much more profound than just some vague health goals to lose weight or stop drinking, for example, but an introspective time whereby we really connected with our ancestors and reflected deeply on how and where we sit in the stream of those that have gone before us, and focus on where we would like to go. And we also focus on those that come after us, our descendants, and how we can create optimal conditions for them to continue the journey. New Year or Janus time is a really good time to reflect on these issues and strategise about our next moves from here, especially where the coming year is involved. It doesn't have to be anything earth-shattering like climbing Mount Everest or hiking through the Amazon rainforest. Well, it can be if you wish, but you may probably find that if you deeply reflect on your own ancestral history and the year just gone, you will have much simpler goals you wish to achieve, but that are still as important and powerful for you. So, Each new year is about emergence of the new us, whilst being intimately aware of the us of the previous year and what that means as this new birthing energy abounds. It's about being firmly rooted while this crossover of energy takes place, so that we can know where we are in this flow of time and where we want to go. Otherwise, we're in danger of being carried away with the current. So what thresholds would you like to cross this year? What doorways would you prefer to never darken again? If you are unsure, look back at 2023 and consider what you would do differently. What did you not have time for that you wished you had? If you wouldn't do anything differently, this is great because it shows that you're going in the right direction for you. This is what Janus is all about. How are we using our time during this incarnation and to what end? It's a moment of deep reflection and pause to consider these concepts. This is how we spin our web of Wyrd and cut our cloths with the material we have at hand. And on that note, I wish you all a very happy new year and a wonderful 2024 ahead. Thanks. Bye.